Hello and welcome to another Thursday night Q&A. I should have been joined this evening by one of my colleagues, Bobby Malarkey from the technical services team, but we are having a few technical difficulties tonight, so please do bear with me. I've got four screens going, a Mac and a Windows laptop, so hopefully we are transmitting. But yeah, as I say, we've had a few technical difficulties today. So Bobby is very good at support in the background and has helped in response to some of the questions that were hung over from last time. So I would have normally introduced you to Bobby at this time, but unfortunately tonight you're just going to have to put up with me as a single presenter. Before we start the Q&A sessions, I'll just go through a few house rules, perhaps for first-time viewers. So we'll start off this evening with the question of the week, which we posted out across our social media channels on Monday. We'll then go through the answers together with the rationale for that answer, so hopefully bring you up to speed on that. Then while you're putting in your questions into the chat, so please do put your questions into the chat, we'll go through some of the questions which we didn't get round to answering from previous Q&A sessions, and we've had a couple of questions that have come in through social media over the last couple of days as well. So please do put your questions in the chat. Remember that there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. Please do remember, however, to be respectful to each other in the chat, as the whole idea of this evening is to collectively try and help each other with the aim of improving our collective knowledge and understanding of all things associated with BS 7671 and the world of electrical installation. I do just have to go through the housekeeping of our disclaimer. So our team, me tonight, will be offering advice and guidance based on the questions asked, but of course our guidance and advice is limited by the extent of information provided in the question. We don't and can't assume any liability to anyone for any loss or damage caused by an error or omission in any of the advice and guidance that I give, whether that such an error is an omission is a result of negligence or any other cause. Where I do make reference to any legislation, it's not to be considered as legal advice, and as always in these sessions, individuals must rely on their own skill and judgment when making use of any of the guidance given. So let's have a look at the question which we posted out on social media earlier this week, and the question was: with respect to classes of external influence, what temperature range does BS 7671 regard as normal? So there are some references to normal temperature range, and quite often then that will be associated with product that have been built for compliance. So yeah, the three options were A, is a normal temperature range in respect to BS 7671 0 to 30 degrees C, 0 to 70 degrees C, -5 to 30 degrees C, or -5 to 40 degrees C. And I did have a little look earlier on today at some of the answers that have come in so far through LinkedIn, and if we take a quick look, 46% of the people had gone for C, -5 degrees to 30 degrees, and most of the others were tottering around 20%. The actual answer is D, -5 to +40%. That's considered the normal range, temperature range, as far as BS 7671 is concerned. Now, how do we arrive at that? Well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, within part 5, under the section which talks about external influences, regulation 512.2.4 has a note which says that For the purposes of BS76M1, the following classes of external influence are conventionally regarded as normal, and then it goes to list a number of external influences, including ambient temperature, which is a reference AA, and it says that ambient temperature has got a code of AA4. So that gives us our code for what's considered as the normal range. If we then go to Appendix 5 in BS76M1 and look in Appendix 5 is all about the classification of external influences, and there's a table with all of the associated codes. If we're looking for AA4, we'll actually find that on page 495. And that will tell us that code AA4 represents an ambient temperature range of -5 to +40 degrees C. So that's considered normal as far as BS76M1 is concerned. So the correct answer was D. I think most people think about 30. 30 is of course referenced a lot within 76M1. It's the temperature that's used for our current capacity tables. But yeah, the actual normal temperature range, so BS76M1 is trying to get us to consider that temperature range when we're thinking about installation and selection of products, is -5 degrees C to 40 degrees C. Okay, so please do post your questions in the chat. The chat's open. As I say, no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. So please do take that opportunity. If you've got a question that's been rattling around that you've always wanted to know the answer to, then please do post it and we'll try and get back to you with the correct answer. While you're doing that, we'll just go through some of the questions that we didn't get round to answering from previous sessions. So the first one that falls into that category is, can I use a minor works certificate when replacing a circuit breaker with an RCBO? This is quite a common question that we get, and we can see the answer is yes, we can. So a replacement to a different protective device would be seen as an alteration. So it's not a like-for-like replacement. We've made it clear that we're replacing a circuit breaker with an RCBO, which will have then different characteristics. So we would suggest that that's an alteration to the existing installation, and therefore for compliance with BS76M1 that alteration would require certification. Now, because it's not a whole new circuit, or it's not a consumer unit or distribution board change, then would be perfectly acceptable to use a minor work certificate for recording that. And as a minor work certificate does make provision for recording all the required tests for the remedial work described, i.e. the change of protective device, and it does require a competent person to certify that the work done, i.e. that change, doesn't impair the safety of the existing installation, and that the design, construction, inspection and testing of the work complies with 76M1. So yes, because it's a different protective device, it would be seen as an alteration to the existing installation, and as an alteration then needs to be certified, but a minor work certificate would be perfectly adequate for that scope of work. Another question that we've had is again perhaps seasonally related. Can a PME supply be used for a shower block and office block on a leisure caravan park? And this one's an answer yes, providing. So if the shower block and the office building are considered permanent buildings, so they're not temporary, if they are permanent buildings, brick buildings for example, then yes, we can supply those from a PME supply. The person asking the question might be referring to the fact that leisure caravan parks are considered a special location covered by section 708 of BS 7671. Within that there's a regulation that states the ESQCR regs, the electrical safety, quality and continuity regulations, prohibit the connection of a PME earthing facility to any metalwork in a leisure accommodation vehicle, including a caravan. So we can't supply the caravan pitches to supply the caravan from a PME supply. But if we go on, it does actually confirm that. However, the regulation says also that this doesn't preclude the use of PME earthing facility as a means of earthing for other purposes, such as the installations of permanent buildings. So if on that site you've got some permanent buildings, you can provide those with a PME supply. The whole difference is that within the permanent building we can better maintain that protection provided by an equipotential zone and ADS, which becomes more difficult when we're outside, to do with the parts of the installation which are exposed to the elements and which the users are potentially exposed to simultaneous contact with true earth and the conductive parts of the installation, so the caravan, the leisure caravan vehicle itself. So yes, in a nutshell, yes, we can, providing those shower block and office block are permanent buildings. Another one that was held over, again perhaps seen as seasonal, is at what depth should a cable be buried for domestic garden lighting? Again, as I say, very common question, and the first thing to say is that 7671 doesn't specify any cable depths at all, so there's no minimum depth for buried cables specified in 7671. There is, however, industry guidance that recommends that buried cables should be at a sufficient depth to avoid being damaged by any reasonably foreseeable disturbance of the ground. So if we're talking about a garden where we're a mower, perhaps people walking on it, so it should be buried at a depth where that normal use isn't going to cause any reasonable foreseeable disturbance of the ground. Typically for gardens, a depth of 1/2 metre is recommended as sufficient to avoid damage by general gardening. Where we've got more onerous conditions present due, for example, to the ground being cultivated, so if we're now talking about an allotment plot, for example, then greater depths should be used. One thing to say is that all buried cables should be identified with a warning tape or cable covers which are installed above the cable, so if anybody does disturb the ground they'll get to those warning tapes and cable covers first. And it's strongly recommended that the route of a buried cable should be identified on a drawing which is attached to the electrical installation certificate, so the person that you're doing the work for is aware of it and then can provide that for people that are working in the future as well. Okay. Let's just have a look. So please do put your information into the any questions that you want asked into the Q&A chat for tonight. This I should have moved on just to say that buried cable should have a warning tape, and it's strongly recommended that we attach a diagram of the cable route to the electrical installation certificate associated with the lighting circuit. Question 4. When carrying out electrical work on an installation forming part of a TNCS system, is it necessary to upgrade the existing 6mm equipotential bonding to 10mm? Again, a very common question, because obviously that was changed previously. The requirement was only to install 6mm bonding on a TNCS installation. Current requirements are a minimum of 10 mil. So we often get to that situation where people are doing additions and alterations to the installation which only has 6 mil bonding. The advice that we give on that is if the existing 6 mil bonding conductors connecting all the extraneous conductive parts to the main terminal, if they've been in for a significant time and show no signs of thermal damage, then it will not be a requirement to upgrade the bonding. So if they're not showing signs that they're constantly carrying current and that current has had a significant effect on the 6 mil conductors, there's no requirement. So unless they're showing signs of thermal damage, you could consider a recommendation to the person that's ordering the work to upgrade the bonding, but it would only be a recommendation, not a requirement. And also if you do decide that you are going to leave them at 6 mil, remember to record that in the details of your certificate in the section regarding comments on existing installation, so you can make it clear that those 6 mil cables were already installed and it wasn't something that you did as part of your installation, but also make reference to the fact that you've done those engineering checks to ensure that you don't need to upgrade the bonding. Another very common question, especially around rented sector properties. So where a C2 classification code has been attributed to an observation during a periodic inspection, how long is deemed acceptable to carry out the required remedial actions to make the installation satisfactory? So if we do produce a condition report and we pass it over to the person that's asked the report and there are C2 observations on the report, how long is considered acceptable in terms of being able to carry out that remedial work to make the installation satisfactory and remove the C2 potentially dangerous condition? So the first thing to say is that BS 7671 recommends that observations classified as C2 potentially dangerous are dealt with as a matter of urgency and dealt with by a skilled person competent in electrical installation work. So although it doesn't give a time frame, it talks about a matter of urgency, because obviously we've got a potentially dangerous situation, and if that situation were to occur, then perhaps it would actually result in present danger. The guidance that we give is based on the legislation that was introduced for the private rented sector. So the private rented sector legislation in England required landlords to complete any remedial work associated with observation classified as C2s within a maximum of 28 days of receiving the report. So once the report is completed and been handed over to the landlord or responsible person for the work being carried out, then there should be those C2s, the remedial action should be done to clear them within 28 days. So that's the guidance that we give. 28 days seems reasonable. You know, there may be certain circumstances outside of domestic situations where longer is needed because perhaps parts are required, but yeah, 28 days in general is considered good guidance and reasonable. If it is going to be longer, then perhaps that should be documented as to reasons why. It might also be, you know, valuable to the people in the future as to evidence why those changes weren't made any quicker, and perhaps it was due to things out of the contractor's control, such as getting parts which were no longer current. Okay, it's great that we've got some questions coming in now, so let's just see if we can take some of those. Is it permissible to install bare conductors within a meter enclosure? If not, why is it permissible to install single insulated unsheathed cables Yes, we're aware that this is quite a hot topic, and our view very much is based on the adequacy of the meter cabinet to form an enclosure. So let me just so if we look at and so sorry, that question's coming this evening, but as I say, because there's been some if we look around regulation 416, which is about barriers and enclosures, and it talks about barriers or enclosures are intended to prevent contact with live parts, and there's a regulation in that section that talks about enclosures shall be firmly secured in place and have sufficient stability and durability to maintain the required degree of protection and appropriate separation from live parts, and also a further reg which talks about where it's necessary to remove a barrier or open an enclosure or remove parts of this enclosure, that should only be used with a possible with only a tool with a tool or a key. And it's also worth pointing out that also if we look at the definition within part 2 of 7671 for enclosures, it says that an enclosure is a part providing protection against certain external influences and in any direction providing basic protection. So the view is that if the enclosure is fit for purpose, i.e. it does provide a barrier between what's inside that meter enclosure, so the door and the lock are in perfect working order, then that's our first barrier, and then the single insulation of the conductors is then the second barrier. So providing those single insulating conductors aren't exposed to touch, because for example the meter box, the door is hanging off, then that's when we would see that that's potentially dangerous. But otherwise it's single insulated conductors within an enclosure, which is permitted by 7671. There's another question that's come in through the chat. I've been asked if I can install, just bear with me, so okay, I've been asked if I can complete a house that has been first fixed by somebody else. It has been plastered throughout and no access to cabling. How do I go about certifying, etc.? Again, this is quite a common issue, unfortunately, in that for one reason or another, perhaps the contractor and the client or homeowner have fallen out, or the contractor's just disappeared. But quite often we get a situation where a second contractor is asked to complete the work. Now the question does say it's a house, so if we are looking at domestic and then eventually looking at a building regulation notification, Part P compliance, then the first thing that we always suggest is talk to the local authority, because unfortunately local authorities around the country have slightly different ways of dealing with this. Some will allow you to do a condition report based on what work was done already, and then do an installation certificate for your work and then combine the two, but they won't go through a proper or a full building control notification process. That they'll go through a slightly different process, which is called regularisation, and so it might mean that the homeowner or client has to take out additional indemnity insurance for the first part of the job. However, we do know that there are some local authorities that won't accept that and will actually ask that the work be started again. So effectively what's been installed will have to be deinstalled and taken out, and the work would need to be started again from scratch so that it can be both certified and notified by a single organisation. Other local authorities then have their own team of people who'll do the first stage, who'll do the condition report based on the job that's first fix by somebody else, and then allow you to continue and do the second fix and certificate your work, even though the contractor is no longer available to certificate the first fix. But again, that would be through a regularisation process and not normal notification for the building regs compliance. So you can move forward, but our advice always is, before you do anything, contact the local authority building control and get guidance from them. Explain what the situation is and what you're being asked to do, so that you can proceed in the best way, which isn't going to warrant any sort of work being redone when it comes to building notification requirements. So yeah, there is an answer, but you would need to get confirmation from local authority building control first before proceeding. Next question, we have a trunking system housing 3-phase circuits wired in singles. The singles have a voltage rating of 750 volt. Can a twin and earth be run in the same trunking with only having a voltage rating of 500 volts? So that's one that's covered by a section on banding. So if I can bear with me on that one, and we'll look into that. I'll just see if there are any others that we can quickly rattle off that are in. Yeah, I think so some other questions. So if we've got just let me refresh that screen. So the singles have a voltage rating of 750, and your voltage rating of 500 volts. So I would believe that, providing you've got cables with the required minimum rating, so 3-phase, I can't see a problem with that, but I would just like 5 minutes to try and check the guidance within 7671. So one question that came in prior to tonight through Facebook was consumer units on walls. Do we need to fireproof seal on the back of the board? In a nutshell, it depends on what the board has is sitting on or has breached. So if that board is set into the fabric of the building and breaks a fire barrier, then it needs to be sealed to maintain the same degree of protection as was there before. But if you're, a typical domestic, the fire barriers are the external walls, because it's a single containment unit. So yeah, it's only, we see that a lot with people, both with consumer units and back boxes for general accessories, fitting fire pads. It's only actually a requirement where what you're fitting has broken a fire barrier, and therefore you need to reseal to maintain the integrity of that fire barrier as it was before you did your install. So consumer unit on domestic walls, generally not a requirement, but if it were, for example, in a multi-story building where you've got fire barriers for example, at every second floor, and you were mounting something that broke that flow barrier, then you would need to seal it accordingly. So it really does depend on what you're mounting it on and whether that's a barrier or not. Second question, again, is quite a hot topic. Some clarification on the retrofitting of USB sockets, LED lights, potentially inducing DC generated fault currents, blinding type AC RCDs. In terms of this, the manufacturer retailers are not informing the public effectively of the potential risk, and businesses are continuing to install them despite the regs saying that it's not allowed. Yeah, it is. It's a hot topic of conversation, and I know it's also a hot topic of conversation within JPEL. What I can say is current requirements for compliance with 7671. It's clear in 531.3.3 that RCD type AC shall only be used to serve fixed equipment where it's known that the load current contains no DC components. So if you're adding fixed equipment that may introduce DC components, you would not be able to add those items of fixed equipment to an existing type AC. If you can prove that they won't, perhaps you've got a declaration from the manufacturer of the item of equipment, then that would enable you to do it, and then obviously append that declaration to your installation certificate to make it clear that you've checked that what you're installing isn't going to introduce any DC components. But yeah, we see it as quite an onerous requirement, especially on additions and alterations to existing installations. We've had numerous instances where people have asked, in particular, that they want to do things like install interconnected smoke detectors, and they're having difficulty getting information from the manufacturer as to whether those interconnected smoke detectors would be, and as an organisation, we view it would be far better to have those smoke detectors in for safety purposes, regardless of whether it's an AC. But as I say, current BS 7671 requirements are that you can't install fixed equipment to a type AC RCD unless you can confirm that the load current will contain no DC component. So let's just have a look. So as I've said, my colleague Bobby has drawn me into the right area regarding band 1, band 2, but these are both of the same band, shall be contained in the same. So we're not mixing bands. Let me just check. So if I go to part 2 and I look at my voltage bands, voltage band 1 is extra low voltage, band 2 then takes us up to low voltage. So both those 750 and 500 volt would be from the same band. So yeah, I can't see any difficulties in having both of those cable types in the same trunking. Every conductor, Bobby's just pointing me in the right, every cable or conductor is insulated for the highest voltage present. So if we've got 3-phase, then yeah, I'm going to take that one away actually, because I'm thinking that 3-phase is 400 volts between phases. So I'm going to check, and we'll come back to you. So we'll post that out as a question and answer for next week. But yeah, every cable or conductor is insulated for the highest voltage present, based on it being we haven't got the exact details, but I'm assuming that if it's a general standard 3-phase circuit, then we'd be looking at 400 volts between conductors. maximum. So yeah, in terms of every cable or conductor being insulated for the highest voltage present, we've got 750 volt and 500 volt rated cables. So let's see what else we have. So can a three-phase armoured cable feed two single-phase circuits having a shared neutral for distribution only? Current carrying capacity is achieved in the shared conductor. Switching is single pole in the line up for each. Clear labelling and diagram is in place. Is this arrangement? So can it feed two single-phase circuits having a shared neutral? I don't believe. Well, certainly the shared neutral. It'd be interesting to see that was drawn out. Certainly we can't have a borrowed neutral. We need to make sure that the line and neutral of each circuit is separate. So no, so looking at that question there, apologies that they're moving. So can a three-phase TP, three-phase armoured feed two single-phase circuits having a shared neutral for distribution only? So no, because those single-phase circuits need to have independent neutrals in order for compliance with 7671. If we look at, just bear with me. Yeah, each final circuit shall be connected to a separate way in the distribution board. The wiring of final circuit should be electrical separate from that of every other final circuit so as to prevent the indirect energizing. So yeah, at first when I read it I thought you were thinking about sharing the four conductors across two, which again is a no-no. So we can't split a three-phase supply across two core cables. That's not permitted either. So yeah, we wouldn't see that. The engineer has said question 1, which so I'm just trying to. So okay, another one that's come in is do I need to provide arc fault detection devices for shaver socket outlets? The answer on that is no. It's not a requirement. And if we have a look, so shaver sockets, regulation 421.1.7 regarding AFDDs for general purpose socket outlets isn't applicable for shaver sockets. Shaver sockets either conform to BSEN 61558 and incorporate an isolating transformer, or conform to BS 5473 and include some low current self-detect protection. So those configurations don't require the enhanced protection of AFDDs. They've got another. They've got already provided with inherent protection, and that's a question actually that is is on RAG. So just to make people aware, RAG is it's freely available. If you go onto the Electrical Safety First website, you can see there's a whole database. There's in fact 2 databases of frequently asked questions, which are the first set is about installs, the second is about periodic inspection and test, and there's a whole raft of questions in each database. This question is covered in Q1, so it's about new installs. Does regulation 421.1.7, which is regarding AFDDs, comply? And you can see that it's the same answer that I've shown previously. This is a database which is produced by RAG, and it's freely available to anybody under the electrical resources section on the Electrical Safety First website. So RAG is the Wiring Regs Advisory Group, and it's made up of the bodies that you can see there. So you can see ourselves, NICEIC, other certification bodies and membership bodies, ECA, NICEIC, Select, and then other organisations, stakeholder in the industry, so people like BEMA, awarding bodies like City and Guilds, and EA, LCL awards. So yeah, it's guidance which can be seen as industry guidance, because there's quite a lot of organisations involved in producing those frequently asked questions and publishing those answers. But yeah, just to make people aware, if you want, please do go onto the Electrical Safety First website. On the top banner, look in the professional resources, and then you'll find a whole load of information. It's in the same initial area as the best practice guides, but you'll very quickly find where the 2 frequently asked question databases are. Let's just see what else we have in the pot. So yeah, apologies, I'm trying to find, so somebody's asked question 1, but I can't see that same engineer's first answer, or first question, so apologies for that. What can we do when external loop is, for example, is within the parameters of DNO? For example, TNCS is 0.35 and I'm getting a reading of 0.3. I have a, okay, with a maximum ZS of 0.081. The first thing to say is that those, so when people are looking at ZEs, and the 0.35 figure for TNCS and the 0.8 figure for TNS, those are typical values. They're not actually thresholds that the DNO has to achieve. So what you would find is if you find that your installations are higher than those threshold values, obviously do report them to the relevant DNO, but you might find that they might not come out immediately unless they have concerns about it being unstable. So those figures aren't a threshold that the DNOs have to achieve. They're really used for design purposes. So if you're doing a design of a new installation, because you won't have anything to measure, you can base your design on those values. If you can't achieve those, you know, then you've got the instances where you've got so if you can't achieve the Z, so long as you can achieve the maximum ZS's for your protective devices, whether that be an overcurrent protective device or an RCD, then that's fine, and you can continue and document your installation. If you are concerned because perhaps you've noticed that the ZE value is increasing, then you might consider factoring that in when you come to recommend the date for your next inspection, and also make a note of the contact that you've had with the DNO so that you've got a record of it, and your client or customer also has a record of it on their certificate. But it's not an issue if you can't, providing you can meet the maximum ZS's for your protective devices to achieve the disconnection times required for the type of circuit. Okay, that's we've run up to the end of our 45 minutes again. I do apologise, I've had to jump around quite a bit tonight. Before I disappear, I just want to make you aware of a couple of things. So firstly, if you aren't registered with us and maybe you're looking at registration for the first time, by all means go onto the NICEIC website or scan the QR code which is on the screen now to find out information about the schemes and electrotechnical schemes that we do offer. Likewise, we have plenty of training opportunities, generally all of the standard electrical installation courses, and most recently the EWA, which is proving to be very popular and useful for people that have been in the industry and perhaps didn't achieve their apprenticeship or didn't formally go to that route. EWA, the Experienced Worker Assessment, is a route for people that can then achieve the equivalent of a modern day MVQ. So please do get in touch. In terms of events that are coming up, we are, although it's only August, very soon, unfortunately the holiday period will be over. We'll be back at ELEX in September at Coventry, and then again in November down at Sandown. So if you are attending those events, please do come along and see us. In October we also have an NICEIC event, so for our certified businesses we've got an upcoming CPD event that people can register for currently. There are limited tickets, so please don't leave it to the last minute, do get in there. And there are multiple talks throughout the day, both from NICEIC Technical Services and external speakers from the electrical installation industry, covering a range of issues from technical, condition report coding, running a business, and health and well-being. So throughout the day I think there are opportunities for 3 talks, so people can pick and choose which sessions they attend, and in total we'll be coming away, if you attend something in each session, with approximately 5 hours of CPD for the day. So really good event. We're looking forward to that, and as I say, that's October 22nd in the Bedford area. You need to pre-register, so please do pre-register. This is where I'd normally talk to my colleague, but as I said, unfortunately with a few technical difficulties that we've had tonight, so thank you very much for taking some time out and taking part. Thanks for the questions that people did post in to the chat feature. Apologies if we didn't get round to answering your particular question tonight. We will hoover those up and use those at the start of our next session in September. and possibly try and post those out as our questions of the week in between now and then as well. Apologies that it's been a bit scattered tonight, but yeah, just one of those times where there's too many screens and too many things going on to run it that smoothly. But hopefully you've got something out of it and enjoyed it as well. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch us. Please do follow us across the social media channels and take some time to register. One thing I forgot to mention, we're very close to publishing the for the NICEIC certified businesses. We're very close to publishing the wire webinar subjects for the autumn winter season. So do keep an eye on the NIC website for those, and in the next few weeks you should be able to register for those. Thanks very much for tuning in. Someone said, can you send the recording of this please and miss the start? You should be able to go once we publish it up. You'll be able to watch it back on YouTube, so we will be doing that automatically. Thanks very much for your participation. Hope you've got something out of it and hope you found it informative. If we don't see you at the external events, hopefully we'll see you next month on Thursday the 4th of September, same time, 8 o'clock, same day Thursday. Thank you very much.